Live streaming is on.
Sorry. Okay. You're good whenever.
All right. Anybody not ready? Fantastic.
What's that?
The United States federal government should pass S-12660 of this 117th Congress, the United States Innovation Competition Act 2021.
Alex.
Oh.
Yeah. I just want to make sure that Kyle is back yet. He said he was going to take a minute to go to the. Oh no.
Yeah, I'm here.
My bad. Sorry about that.
Okay. Plan is the United States federal government should pass S-1260 of this 117th Congress, the United States Innovation and Competition Act of 2021. Advantage 1. Uniqueness number 1 is cyber warfare is increasing popularity. Now the A argument is the United States has identified cyber warfare as the fifth domain of warfare. The B argument is the attacks are increasing now, or have increased in the past. Stuxnet prove that cyber warfare necessarily is able to take out grids and necessarily create actual damage and infrastructural damage against an opposing country. The C argument is China's already gearing up. Particularly, not only have they invested a significant amount of money into semiconductors, but also advanced technologies and advanced computing power. The second argument is the United States is incapable of stopping attacks. The A argument is Russian attacks have not been identified, nor have they been stopped by the United States and Russia is necessarily using external actors, which indicates the United States is not only terrible at the cyber warfare and the status quo, but also cannot stop even particularly individualized or small actor attacks. The link. One is advanced tech is necessarily key to shoring up any cyber capability shortcomings. The A argument is computers are absolutely key. China has an absolute hegemony on the semiconductor industry. And is about to supplant the United States in computing power. The B argument is the plan develops quantum computing. This makes us unstoppable, particularly because we can not only be able to identify attacks, but also have a significant faster computing powers, significantly more powerful and significantly faster computers that are necessarily able to fight back against cyber attacks. The C argument is the plan increases funding into cyber defense in all respects from the economic base to the actual training of individuals. The impact is number 1. The cyber attacks. A argument is they will occur in the future, particularly because this is the fifth domain of warfare, and states are necessarily increasing their capabilities and ability to engage within it. The B argument is that cyber attacks necessarily cause extinction, particularly because number 1 is there's an irrational response to attacks against the grid and computing power and technology in the first place. This is already proven by Stuxnet. And second is there's no standard operating procedures to being able to respond to a cyber attack, which always causes a increased escalation. The second advantage. Uniqueness number 1 is Russia will invade Ukraine within days. The A argument is there are 100,000 troops on the border of Ukraine. The B argument is that their last-second logistical supplies are necessarily being brought to the front. This is things like blood. The B argument or the C argument is the United States intelligence indicates that 50,000 civilians are at risk and they will attack within the next week. The link is first industrial bases, propping up the industrial bases to prepare to support Ukraine is necessarily key. The A argument is javelins. The Russian tanks cannot actually respond to any javelin attacks, and the B argument is the money to support advanced targeting industry is necessarily key. You have to be able to produce those javelins in the first place to be able to send them to the front. The second argument is the plan is a powerful deterrent for invasion. The A argument is javelins are necessarily key. This has already been seen when Russia opposed the export of javelins to Ukraine in the first place. The B argument is reverses Biden's failures to actually do anything about Ukraine. He's just said that an invasion is different from a minor incursion, which indicates that Biden is weak on this area. The C argument is this is an explicit response to Russian expansion. The United States is necessarily seen as an actor who necessarily needs to respond, and this will be perceived as such. The impact is one as a Ukrainian invasion causes extinction. It escalates as NATO draw in, and other countries necessarily see this as an opportunity to either enter the war or have their own geographical capabilities within the region. The Ukrainian invade and this draws in great powers, which cause proxy conflicts and the escalation into nuclear warfare. The second is human rights abuses. Russian invasion, particularly in Georgia and other places, have already seen widespread human rights abuses. This particularly because Russia's use of mercenaries has no specific standard operating procedures defined by governments, nor are they beholden to the rules of engagement. I guess human rights abuses are dehumanizing. Third advantage. Uniqueness number one is hegemony is in decline now. The A argument is Biden has seen as an incompetent military leader. The United States is seen as weak on Afghanistan and weak on Ukraine. The B argument is the industrial base is failing. The new age Zumwalt class destroyers have missile tubes that are only produced in one factory. This is significantly decreases. This is a significant decrease from when the class was commissioned years ago. The C argument is United States troops are necessarily decreasing. COVID has got its capacity to deploy effectively, not only in bases where bases get locked down as a result of a single infection, but also COVID spreads incredibly rapidly on naval ships, and the vaccine requirements have started to cause Army units to leave. The link. One is the plan solves a hedge decline. It's a $110 billion investment into advanced technology. The A argument is computers allow for the decreased troop presence and shore up any decreased hegemony from those troops leaving. UAVs, robots, and drones supplant United States troops and remove the need for more boots on the ground. The B argument plan bolsters the industrial base. This ensures production of advanced weapons and are profitable for factories that are not producing advanced weapons in the status quo. The C argument reassures the United States allies a commitment to security and ensures the United States hegemony is extended to the future. The impact is great power war. The A argument is absent hegemons, great powers fill in the vacuums, i.e. those with regional capabilities and the want for regional stability. Well, regional security, moreover, will go in and fill in these vacuums. The B argument causes nuclear lash out. States use any weapons to secure their own survival, and a nuclear war would cause extinction, particularly because wind patterns carry global fallout across the land. Underview. Interpretation, prioritize the United States grand strategy, prioritize United States grand strategy above all else. Prioritize the United States grand strategy above all else. First justification, the grand strategy defines the United States security apparatus. The argument comes first, particularly the grand strategy controls budget allocation. This is already proven by necessarily budgets allocated to things that are not necessarily immediately useful, like littoral combat ships. The B argument is that this is already seen in the economic realm, i.e. that grand strategy frames other impacts. This is already proven when NATO bailed out South Korea. The C argument is, was it NATO? Whatever. The South Korea bailout. The C argument is grand strategy stops extinction, particularly it allows the civil military connections and input negotiations to be able to prioritize specific impacts. This has already seen in World War II in the Tehran Conference. The second argument is moving away from grand strategy causes air replications. The other argument is that Project Solarium was the top-down effort in Vietnam to be able to increase infrastructure within the region, but Nixon allowed this to slip into the quagmire of Vietnam, which caused massive amounts of debt. The third argument is good for debate. The argument that the prioritization of grand strategy, the ability to see whether or not it follows grand strategy or doesn't follow strategy, offers a objective impact filter. The B argument is this is the key resistance strategy, i.e. Looking at the United States' fundamental capabilities and the ability for their goals necessarily allows resistance groups to necessarily resist them better. There are 5 tenets of grand strategy. The first is preventing WMDs. The second is allied cooperation. The third is border security. The fourth is global system security. And the fifth is strategic foreign relations. We are number 1, number 3, and number 4.
Cool. Can we get a copy of your plan text? Cool, starting flex. On your first advantage, you said at the uniqueness that Russia had attacked the U.S., right? With cyber attacks, that is?
Multiple actors have attacked the United States.
Okay, cool. Why hasn't the U.S. nuked anyone if apparently they react too harshly to these attacks if they've already been attacked several times?
Because none of these attacks have been big enough because cyber capabilities are not there yet. So we didn't indicate that the uniqueness is moving in the direction of advanced cyber capability.
Okay. Yeah. How many javelins do you provide Ukraine?
I don't know, however many $110 billion provides.
So is it specifically $110 billion that's going directly to Ukraine?
No, we'd indicate that $110 billion is going to advanced and basic weaponry as well as computers and all things that are able to solve the advantages. We won't isolate exactly how much of that money goes to specific javelin production. We'd indicate that that money also goes to producing and developing things like advanced targeting that are necessary for things like javelins. And
okay. Does that production happen in a week? Because that's when you said Russia's invading.
Well, yes, it does.
Okay, very cool.
Because money flows very fast.
I'm sure.
Cool. Order's going to be 3 off, and then case. Yeah. Actually, no. 3 off, case in the order of the underview, and then the order it was read. Again, that is 3 off, the underview, and then case in order. Cool. All right. 8 minutes starting now. First is the framework. The world is fundamentally unknowable. Life only has value insofar as we value it. You'll vote negative because our performance is relative to the performance of the AF. 1, our construction of reality is fundamentally unknowable. Our senses are incapable of processing basic things like infrared and low-frequency sounds. Our memories are altered every time we access them. And the future is fundamentally denied to us by our perception of time. We don't use convenient narratives to help us navigate the world, but that doesn't mean they represent reality. It just means that they're functional. To the human, it's not a survivalist animal. It's maxless. Life alone is insufficient. The only question of whether we concern ourselves with meaning is to life. The human experience is not just eat, sleep, fucking die. It's about finding meaning in those things: culture and food, dreams and sleep, love and sex, peace and death. Reducing the calculation of human life to yes, no, alive, dead is a drastic oversimplification of what it means to be human that ignores the basic fact that each and every single one of us will inevitably die. Becoming precedes being. The question of what it means to be human is about change. Static conceptual ontology missed the point entirely. The human experience is only understood through the difference in changes in perception and condition. There's no higher truth to ontology. We merely happen to exist and hope to explain it. 4, evaluate the debate as competing in performances. Literally, is that obviously the plan doesn't begin to exist when you vote AF. The only thing that matters is the endorsement of particular speech acts and the way of engaging with each other in the world. That is the only way to derive meaning from the debate. B, all debate is intrinsically performative. They play the role of policymaker. We play the role of artist. Anything else is not a description of debate as it's played, but is a self-serving grade for your ballot. Links. The AF seeks to naturalize a myth of progress and technological inevitability, dooming us to either be replaced by automatons or become automations or become automatons. 1 is technocracy. The AF's description of our world is fundamentally missionary. The claim that changing a single part, the whole system begins to start functioning again. This literally removes the human element of the equation. It's a technocratic decision to eliminate the human in favor of a machine which performs the same function without fail. The idea that we must advance in the name of productivity is exactly the problem. It strips value. It strips value from current meaning and provides it as offering a better future. 2 is scientific rationalism. The AF's reliance on cause and effect claims and empirical evidence betray its conception of the world as a noble or object for study. This data-driven model attempts to quantify human experience. It seeks to the affirmative drive to use big data to control the chaos of human behavior and have perfect automations. Their emphasis on a technological revolution is literally a part and parcel of the capitalist machine, making us into eventual automatons. And 3, duty ethics. The AF is quite literally an appeal to a categorical imperative to defend the future, i.e. that is their arguments about defending and recreating the U.S. grand strategy. It strips present life of distinction and robs potentiality from bodies by indebting us to a future that isn't guaranteed. That makes present life a stepping stone to a technologically superior dystopia. That's the impacts. Their myth of progress and technocratic naivete and dooms us to untold suffering and material extinction, turning the AF. 1, their ethics strips value to life. Human life cannot be categorized by anything other than the subject. Their mechanistic view robs life of value and locks us into a hard determinism that makes us meaningless gods, meaningless machines, unable to exercise free will, waiting for new technology to save or kill us. 2 is extinction. The myth of progress is unsustainable. Infinite growth is not possible in a finite world. Climate change will kill all life on Earth because of mass ecosystem collapse caused by ocean acidification, coastal flooding, and depleting resources. And thus the alternative, we plagiarize the plan. Here's a picture of Uncle Sam giving money to Karen, the Plankton's wife from SpongeBob. And then there's Plankton in there. I don't know. Seems kind of funny. On the solvency, first is plagiarism is the process of experimenting with and satirizing not only an artifact, but oneself in the world. We start taking an artifact of the AF and using it as a starting point in an artistic project to play that imagines possibilities distinct from the world we live in now. 2, we reclaim pleasure in playing now. In the now, artists' refusal to participate in the reigning social order and begs for a counterworld. The future is denied. Acting in the now can generate meaning is the only way that our labor can have meaning and become something playful worth celebrating and doing. This is the counterworld of the alternative artistic expressions for the sake of a different narrative than yours. 3, art creates elective affinity, letting people find meaning on their own. People are drawn together by art, whether it's impressionism, punk, the Harlem Renaissance, or the Globe Theater. Humans elect to join each other, and the movements are built around artistic expression, which rejects the social order of the world in which they live. 4, no perms. We have a purpose of wandering away from the policy world of the affirmative. We use art as a mechanism of rejecting your world and imagining counterworlds, even if they're doomed to failure. They're distinct and meaningful, which is more than we could say for the AF. 5, estrangement solves the AF. We are an act of making the world of the AF feel strange and uncomfortable. It forces us to act out against to change the world. We have a better causal relationship with changing the systems of power than you do. The arts movement of the 60s drew on the uncomfortability of the draft and the cookie cutter war narratives that got the draft undone. No fiat AF has ever fixed shit. Onto the disadvantage. uniqueness. Point one. During the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, the first year or so, anti-Asian hate attacks rose significantly. Little A is that Governor et al. Explains that hate crimes rose significantly due to conspiratorial attacks and rhetorical posturing from people like Donald Trump that called the virus the quote-unquote Wuhan virus and the quote-unquote China virus. B, these rhetorical constructions of China and Wuhan as a virus feed into our conceptions of Asian folks generally as bad and to blame for COVID-19. And C, however, these constructions have been decreasing as world leaders like Biden have moved away from harmful rhetoric. The links: one, the plan feeds into the conspiratorial perspectives of QAnon folks and racists, providing them with what they'll view as proof that Wuhan and China are generally have something to do with either covering up or the creation of the COVID virus. This emboldens some very scary people that we've already seen that are willing to do some very scary things. The AF adds another pushpin to the board for support for their theory, this one directly coming from the U.S. federal government. B, the Wuhan Institute for Virology is not what the U.S. paints it out to be. The Bloomberg initiative of a former employee who said that the U.S. is constructing it as a place that does not follow policies and procedures, that does not align with any of the experiences there until 2019 when she left it to come back to the U.S. One, this means that this is extra bad. The U.S. is literally putting in supervision for no material reason. And two, the U.S. is specifically saying the lab engaged in manipulating viruses to make them more deadly. This lab tech is unequivocally false, and she was very high up from Australia, if that matters. Two, the plan also reconstructs harmful rhetoric employed by Trump and others, blaming the worst of the pandemic on a country that had next to zero COVID cases this week. Literally, the U.S. is one of the primary reasons COVID is so bad right now. We literally have no federal mask mandate, no vaccine mandate. We're letting people fly all over, and we block so many countries from getting the vaccine. In fact, this creates a logic of extermination against China and Asia, more generally rooted in Orientalism. Two, this also leads to a direct tangible increase in hate crimes against AAPI folks, and as the U.S. right-wing conspiracy theorists take matters in all hands over the two edges. Little A, that leads to unending psychological violence against those living in constant fear of threat and attack. Thus, the counter plan: the USFG should pass Senate Bill 1260 of the 117th Congress, the United States Innovation Competition Act of 2021, except the provision that prohibits federal funding for the Wuhan Institute of Virology. I'll put it in the chat. Solvency 1. The counter plan solves the AF. We pass all of the important components of the AF except for the provisions that prohibit funding of the Wuhan Institute of Virology. This avoids the link to the disadvantage. And two, this also means that we solve the AF because we do not provide evidence in the PMC saying that this is positioned in particular central to the solvency of the affirmative. And two, avoiding the disadvantage is key. Any instance of racism must be rejected. The counter plan solves the uniqueness for the disadvantage. Thus, the competition. The textual one, they specify in their plan text that they're passing the entire rule, which means that any permanent severance for the 1AC, which is a reason to reject them on fairness and education. Two, functional. You literally can't pass some of the bill and all of the bill at the same time. Great. On to case proper. On to the underview. First, our interpretation is fundamentally better for evaluating this debate round because, one, our engagement in the artistic play fundamentally means that we are able to engage with an elective affinity to better create and understand the strategies that the U.S. is going to use, meaning that we must first understand ourselves and our being before we can understand the being of the nation state that surrounds us, meaning that we fundamentally come first on the interpretation. You try to make these arguments about why it's good for debate, but we're fundamentally better for debate because we force you to think critically about the topics that we're giving you right now. On to the first advantage. The first advantage is that the uniqueness overwhelms that your uniqueness is trending in the wrong direction. The United States has made significant investments in cybersecurity after the oil pipeline attacks in 2020, meaning that the cybersecurity is fundamentally getting invested right now. You said the U.S. is incapable of stopping cyber attacks, but those are just the ones that you haven't heard of. The United States probably stops thousands of cyber attacks every single week. These are just ones that slip through the cracks that you hear of, meaning that we're trending, that the uniqueness is trending in the wrong direction. And the link turn, fundamentally, you said that increases funding into cybersecurity. Actually, impact turn, you make cyber attacks fundamentally worse because you're engaging within the U.S. federal government by I don't know, Jesus.
No nuke war from cyber attacks. Then move on.
Okay. What, Matt?
There's no nuclear war from cyber attacks.
Oh, yeah, there's no nuclear war from cyber attacks. On to the second advantage. You say that invading Ukraine is going to happen this week. That's just fundamentally not true. There's been no articulation coming from the U.S. federal government, Ukraine, or Russia saying that anyone is ready to invade at this current time, meaning that there's no uniqueness and there's no link, or it means that you have no access to any of your links. But even if so, that your plan fundamentally makes invasion more likely. Linked in your plan makes the invasion more likely because the U.S. is shown as increasing military capabilities, which is going to spook Russia. On the third disadvantage, uniqueness over on the links. Hegemony is increasing now because we're able to take action in Ukraine.
Can we get all the other texts as well?
Which other texts do you want?
The alt, the roll ballot.
Here, this is the alt. Where is it? Here it is.
Oh, okay.
And there was no roll of the ballot.
Okay.
There was like a thesis to the framework. I can give you that if you want.
No, that's okay.
Status of both advocacies.
Extremely conditional.
All right. The order is going to be a new sheet on top, and then the AF in the order that Alex read it, and then the neg in the order that Matt read it. Or sorry, Kyle. Actually, just kidding. It's going to be K counterplan disad for the neg. I'm just putting the pick above the disad.
Can I get that order one more time? Sorry.
Yeah, it's going to be a new sheet on top. Then it's going to be the AF in order of add 1, 2, 3, and then the underview. And then it's going to be the K straight down, and then the counterplane and the disad. Is anybody not ready? All right, sounds good. Interpretation: the negative may not read a plan inclusive counterplan. The negative may not read a plan inclusive counterplan. The violation of their counterplan specifically includes the entirety of the plan, with the item that is specified to be exempted from it, which makes it a plan inclusive counterplan. The first hand is going to be MG skew. This skews the entirety of the MG because it makes the entirety of the offense that we've already read naturally moot because they're able to resolve the entirety of the offense, but then makes it by the one specific part of offense. This sanctioning form of fairness, which is particularly bad because the MG is the only speech in which we're able to generate sticky offense against the block. The second standard is going to be topic education. This makes topic education only about one specific provision of the bill. Being able to discuss the entire provision of the bill is going to be much better because it allows for a broader solvency debates. Broader solvency debates are more inductively verifiable, which will one better for fairness because we're able to verify particular claims, but also that we're able to talk about the entirety of the topic, which means that we're always able to utilize prep arguments more. We would also indicate that this is particularly bad in a world where they can spend 20 minutes investigating one potential pick, but we've spent 20 minutes looking at every single pick, which terminally skews out any form of topical education. The third standard is going to be normal means. This justifies a normal permutation due the AF or do the counterplan as normal means, i.e. that bills aren't necessarily amended all the time, and which indicates it's able to be able to resolve in the entirety of the offense, but also that we could just pass a second provision after the bill, which would effectively do the counterplan, which would result, meaning it's not an opportunity cost. It's going to be voted for fairness. That fairness is key to the access within the round in the first place. Is going to be voted for education. That education is the only portable skill that we leave to go back to fairness. Also, that fairness is necessarily key because it prevents because without fairness, it skews the evaluation next to you. Should prefer competing interpretations because reasonability goes to the bottom. This is operator because it's a question of whether or not they have a justification to read the arguments in the first place. Go to the AF. Next, they say that investments are happening now. It's probably stopped, and we're probably stopping these attacks. But the fact that there are attacks that we're not being able to stop, and they're happening from individual actors within Russia, indicates that we're definitely not able to resolve. But also, these investments aren't enough in a world where these attacks are happening by like rogue agents with just like $70,000 in their bank account, which indicates that we absolutely need to be able to increase spending. Next, you say that there's an impact turn, but you literally forget what the impact turn is halfway through, which means next argument you say there's no nukes from cyber attack. There's no warrant here. We indicate there absolutely is nukes. We indicate the irrational reaction from 9/11 or attacks to U.S. infrastructure indicates that there will always be an irrational response, which risks this calculation onto the second advantage. You say there's no reason, there's no intelligence, but you consider that it was literally an intelligence report that it came out. When did it come out last week?
No, like 20 minutes ago.
Oh,
during prep.
Oh yeah, like 20 minutes ago during prep, you probably should have had Max Groznik's news alerts in your prep room, which indicates that it absolutely is going to happen, which means we're always going to be we have the more up to date warrants. But also, you say there's a link to make it more likely because there's increased U.S. capabilities, but you're too far behind on the Union side. The fact that the U.S. is literally just sitting on their hands currently indicates that the U.S. actually starting to do something would make it less likely in a world where we have the capability to give a bunch of javelins, which Putin knows is his one weakness, which means we're able to resolve it. You can send the impacts of extinction and human rights abuses onto.
It's also perceptual deterrence.
Yeah, it's also perceptual deterrence. Yeah. On the third one, you say that hedge is increasing now because of Ukraine, but we're literally not doing anything in Ukraine. You dropped this entire thing. This is you can extend it through ink here, particularly that the loss of hedge is going to cause a great power war, which is always going to go nuclear and kill us all. On to underview. You say the play is going to be better because it creates like an affinity, and we are able to think critically. But you consider that this is necessary that the grand strategy is key to having forms of resistance. The way that people understand, like, or the USMC understands, like Mao's on guerrilla warfare indicates that you're probably always going to be too far behind if you're just going to like play in the play while there's like troops marching or crushing you means probably you're not able to resolve it. Also, you can see that this is going to be the best way to understand debate, particularly because it provides clear impact calculus. On to the K. On the top level of criticism, this is just a bunch of nonsense. Reality is actually real. We can definitely inductively prove this. I think that there are objective. You can like record things, and even if there is like some disagreement about what actually happens within reality, reality is always going to be 100% be real in some capacity. But we were also going to indicate that this is no model to be able to understand the world, which indicates that it's tried to pretend that reality is real, which people always do inevitably in a world because they securitize their own worldview, which means that there's no way that we're like supposed to understand the world as unknowable, which means that we definitely can know. But I can go stand up and turn off the lights and it'll be dark in here, which means that we can absolutely resolve these sort of things. You say that we're all performers. We're going to say being a hedge debater is a much better performer because we had to talk about guns and we are cooler than you. Next on the link, you say we become automatons. We would indicate that there's no clear link how we become automatons, but also automatons are pretty sick. Either being able to stop cyber attacks is always going to be being able to become cyborgs that are absolute U.S. hegemons is going to be able to resolve any sort of this value. Yeah.
Also, like, fake hearts are cool.
Yeah, fake hearts are cool. Next, you say rationalism, whatever. Go on to the impact.
Wait, science is good.
That's where I'm putting that.
Okay, that's fair.
The impact here is that science is necessarily good. We indicate that every single disease that you could die from, we need some sort of scientific rationalism to be able to resolve. In a world where we flee from scientific rationalism, we all die. This means that we all die from COVID. We all die from swine flu. We all die from every single pandemic that we solve via things that were scientific rationalism. But it also means that we hurt ourselves when we touch fire because we have because without scientific rationalism, we never have the inductive knowledge to be able to say that that hurt me last time. I'm not going to do it again. Which means that you're never able to resolve. Science is absolutely a killer. Also, if you don't like science, you should get off your laptop. Next, you say that extinction is inevitable in a world of climate change. We indicate that science is going to be the only system that's able to resolve this in a world where we need a carbon capture to be able to get rid of it. We're past 104 parts per million, which indicates that any other system where we just like draw things is never going to get rid of the carbon in the atmosphere, which means that it's tried to reject the alternative to be able to resolve this. On to the alt. You're not able to solve the AF because you don't do the AF. You just drew a picture. Your picture sucks. Yeah. Next articulation I want is that nobody was able to even see your picture because you only held it up for a couple seconds. Next argument I want is that art is actually fascist. Salvador Dali loved Hitler, but also that the focus on aesthetics necessarily moves us away from the like objective suffering that is caused under fascism, which focuses the state as the arbiter of all governance and the fusion of the political, which allows for fascists to always be able to take over. Also, here's the permutation. Now, the other permutation is do both. Permutation do both is able to resolve it because we can plagiarize something and have the authentic version. On to the counterplan. Your counterplan sucks because it doesn't increase hegemony. This is seen as taking a soft stance on China. In a world where this gets wiped out of the bill at the last second, Republicans definitely say, "Oh, look, Biden loves China," which means that we absolutely tank any form of hegemony. But next argument I want is that banning funding is key to hegemony. Virology labs are tools of state research and development. The Bureau has set standards for further provisions against foreign labs. This year, the international allies and actors have asked for the banning of funds already, which means it's also naturally key to soft power. Going back on this statement when it's perceptually popular from our individual our allies is always going to be bad. Next, you say textual competition means there's no that any permutation will be severance. We're going to say we've already you can crossify the permutation, do the AF as normal or do the counterplan as normal means, but also this isn't going to be severance in a world where in a world where we just have to pass it. The process of passing includes the debates and the changes to the affirmative. But also you say that we're going to say perm do both. We pass multiple bills at the same time all the time. This means that even if there's some sort of disagreement, it can just be resolved in the courts. This isn't severance because we still passed the entirety of the plan. Anything else on this? No. On to the disab. On to the link level, the first argument was that hegemony is able to solve these sort of racist ideologies that come from threat construction. In order we're the absolute hegemon. There's no reason that people are like afraid of the Wuhan virus or the Chinese virus because we're not afraid of China in the first place. This means that we're absolutely able to resolve these sort of like fear mongering that comes. The reason Trump did that is because he saw China was stacking their money and they had to posture against it, which means that in a world where we don't even worry about China, it doesn't mean we don't frame China in that way. The next argument I want is that the plan literally makes guns cheaper. Asian Americans are literally arming themselves in the status quo, which means that we make the guns cheaper, which means that people are able to defend themselves from hate crimes. This is always going to outweigh the sort of immaterial logic of extermination in order to we materially allow individuals to defend themselves.
Racism is inevitable.
Yeah, racism is also inevitable within. Why?
Oh, no. Ingrained in life.
Status quo doesn't solve racism. How about that?
Yeah, sure.
Cool. Starting a minute of flex. Cool. Order is going to be the counter plan on top. Then it is going to be picks bad. Then the overview on top of the critique. Then the criticism in the order that it was read. Then the interp that was read at the bottom of the affirmative. Then the rest of the af in the order that it was read.
One more time, Matt.
Yeah. Order is counterplan on top. Then picks bad. Actually, sorry. Counterplan, disad, picks bad. Then the critique, top down with an overview on top. And then the af with their underview, advantage 1, 2, and 3 in order. Cyber war, Ukraine. Hedge. Alrighty. Can everyone hear me? Great. Is anyone not ready? Wonderful. On the counterplan not going forward, it was conditional, which takes out all of their disadvantages against the counterplan. Also, purposes test competitions on advocacy, which means there's no reason they would be able to resolve any of the offense on the disad. Extend that racism is inevitable, I guess. No warrant. We'll go with it. Picks bad. First argument is going to be that we meet your interpretation specifically because we kicked the pick from the debate, which means it doesn't exist anymore, which means there's no sticky offers from your theory shell. Second argument is going to be the counter interpretation. The negatives and thought a plan inclusive counterplan on a whole resolution. Once again, the negatives and thought a plan inclusive counterplan on a whole resolution. The third argument is that we meet the counter interpretation because we read a pick. The C sequence is going to be the standards. The first argument is policy education picks are key to policy education because it allows for us to understand the specifics intricacies of certain bills dealing with policy only in broad strokes. Means that we completely ignore particularities that often have wide-ranging consequences. For example, the way that gun control bills always have exceptions for police that we never actually talk about. The second argument is that's key in this instance. There's literally a rider on this posits that China is somehow responsible for a global pandemic. This Orientalist framing and threat construction should be talked about, but won't be without picks. The third argument is ground picks are key for negative ground. You get 7 minutes of offense against status quo. We only get 8 minutes against a hypothetical war. It's key to result in outside bias. The fourth argument is a hard debate is good debate. Picks force rate of 2 dig into the nitty-gritty of their ass, which is better for education clashes. We talk about the substance of certain words as opposed to wide-ranging theorizations. Their standards. Now, first I say MGSQ. First argument is that you actually have no skew because you get sticky offense against things like the particularities of the bill, specifically the way that you articulated it's key for hegemony indicates reasons why you still have offense. Second argument is that there is a massive outside bias. You can speak first and last, which means having multiple strategic options for the negative is key to resolve the bias. Second argument, you say is topic education. We say that we are definitely turning topic education, homie. There is way more topic education if we get to talk about the actual particularities of the bill as opposed to the wide-ranging theorizations like your advantages. The third argument, you say is that there's a press. I would articulate that I've already resolved that question. The next, you say is no permutations at all, or doesn't exist anymore. Permutations don't matter, and drop the argument. Don't drop the debate, or doesn't exist in the debate anymore, which is no reason that we should lose for this. And default can be reasonability, which means if we win any defense or offense in the shell, you don't vote here. Overview of the critique. They have fundamentally missed the boat on the critique. We are not trying to movement build or anything of that sort. Rather, we are saying that the escape from capitalism is inevitable in the status quo, which means it's only a question of how we ought to live our lives, not what we can do to save lives, which is the entirety of the affirmative thesis. They have missed the boat of that life is fundamentally a question of maximalism, not survivalism. That who cares if we live, if we are only living to be cogs in a machine that wants us to be destroyed, which indicates the reasons why the app has a top shelf uniqueness claim on what it means to be alive in the first place. On the framework, the first argument that I want to extend is that construction of reality is unknowable. They say that reality is noble because we can do things like record and let's try it. There's 4 reasons that's why that's not fundamentally not true. First, that there's literally certain things that you can't see. You have conceded the arguments that indicate things like infrared and sonic rays are not things that we can actually interpret, which indicates reasons why there's certain things we can't know. But second is that there are tons of warrants from your own military industrial complex that disprove what we can and cannot know. First is the Bush-Iraq war instance, where there was definitely apparently WMDs in Iraq that were never actually found, but the entire American public was convinced because that's what the National Security Advisor said, which indicates reasons why there are certain things that we are misled about. And third, the how many javelins are going to Ukraine. I asked them this inflex, and they cannot tell me, which probably gives us credence on our arguments that we are just a bunch of idiotic parley debaters spewing numbers that don't actually mean anything, which means you should default to us not being able to extrapolate things beyond the individual self. But I also want to extend the second argument now, which is that humanism is about maximalism, not survivalism, that we don't just exist to eventually die, but rather it's how we live that life that's important, and that their technocratic regimes which strips value of that life, makes it impossible to live in the first place. I also want to extend the fourth framing argument that you should evaluate this as a question of competing speech acts. They just said that they have a cooler speech act because they can talk about guns, but it's not a question of how cool a speech act is. Rather, it's the elective affinity that we can get from a speech act, i.e. what we can take from beyond that. We said that individual affirmation is far more productive than simply being cogs in a machine in the interest of global productivity. Let's go on to the links now. The first link I want to extend is the link about regarding technocracy. Their only response to this is saying that automation is cool, but that's not the actual link. The actual link is saying that first and foremost, you make people automatons vis-a-vis your obsession with technocracy. That's saying that we must be productive for some future generation is exactly the problem, because it indebts us to a future that is never promised for us. The idea that we have to be productive for someone else is what prevents us from enjoying our own lives right now. It strips value life and ensures that we're just cogs in the machine that wants us to destroy us. I also want to extend the scientific rationalism link, specifically that you are focused on expanding the technological revolution is exactly the problem. It brings us closer to the regimes of automation. They say automatons are cool, that beating hearts are cool. Who gets the beating hearts? Who benefits from the automatons? Not regular people. Rather, it's the capitalist machine that only seeks to destroy us, which indicates reasons why we are way ahead on the question of what it means to live under capitalist regimes. Lastly, I want to extend duty ethics. They have not touched this whatsoever, which means you guys 100% risk of a link here, which is necessarily they say that we must act as moral and good human beings for someone else, which precludes our ability to act within our own self-interest, which prevents us from actually ever enjoying the moment. Subpoint A is that any risk of a link serves as a massive disadvantage to the permutation, because there's no reason as why you would ever risk a link, especially when it releases more impacts. Extend the no value life argument. 0 ink on this means you give us full credence in a world where we are cogs in a capitalist machine that wants to destroy us. There's no life worth living. That has a couple of implications. Subpoint A is that it means you preface the criticism over the affirmative. Even if they can prevent nuclear war, who cares if people get to live as without any value in their lives, which means we have a top shelf uniqueness claim there. But second, I will also extend the extinction argument. They only say the science resolves extinction, then it's try or die. Again, we're not trying to try and keep people alive within a system that wants to destroy us. It's actually better if things go extinct as long as people can be free. Yeah. Their answers first. They only say that our picture was bad, and that Salvador Dali says that art can be used as fascism. That is not our argument whatsoever. You have conceded the argument that indicates that plagiarism is a satirization of regimes that allows us to actually reclaim the resolution for artistic value, and that artistic value is necessary for the individual affirmation necessary to break apart the paradox of the affirmative, but also that it creates for things like elective affinity, i.e. that we can, i.e. like when we can embrace these things as being important in and of themselves, we can then actually go and make legitimate decisions because we understand ourselves and what our own desires are, which means that we are a prior question. Any sort of policy making of the app also means we upload the entirety of their interpretation, because who cares if there's a grand strategy if no one actually knows what they're doing inside strategy. Lastly, I'm going to extend the no permutations argument that we are a purposive wandering away from their policy building world with the affirmative. On the permutation specifically, they just said permutation do both. To a couple of decides the permutation first is that permutation is not necessary. You can see that in strange solves the entirety of your app, which means that there's no reason that's why the perm is necessary. But second, also all the links are independent decides the permutation. Just to address this decide like the Salvador Dali fascism stuff more specifically, they didn't actually give any warrants for this aside from saying that the state can co-opt art. We don't care who co-opts art. Rather, we're saying that individual affirmation will allow you to control art, even if troops are marching down. On to the underview. Prefer the framing of the criticism over the entirety of their underview. They have not given a concrete reason as to why life is worth living within their security apparatus, rather just saying that security apparatus is important for national security. We would articulate that the military machine that they articulate as being important is part and parcel to the global regimes of capitalism that make people into technocratic automatons, which indicates reasons why you should evaluate the criticism as an impact to the entirety of their framing sheet. But also I want to extend Kyle's argument, or I want to answer their they make this argument that we allow better resistance under the world of the app because we understand the military. We're not trying to resist anything. We're not trying to make more broader social movements. Rather, we're just trying to allow people to enjoy their own individual affirmation, which means that obsessing over things like intricate military details is not necessarily important for the solvency mechanism of the affirmative, especially in a context where we're satirizing the military, which means that your interpretation, A, never comes first, and B, isn't necessary. Advantage 1. The only thing that I'm going to go for on advantage 1 is the impact defense. There's literally zero nuclear war that results from cyber attacks. You yourself have been multiple examples with multiple actors apparently cyber attacking the U.S. and never having this disproportionate response, which indicates that even if you are winning, that the uniqueness is trending in the wrong direction. And the combination of Kyle's uniqueness defense about how the U.S. is also somewhat investing in cybersecurity means that there's probably not going to be this disproportionate response you talk about. You should be very skeptical on the impact level of advantage 1. Second, on advantage 2, they say Ukraine is coming right now. First and foremost, all of the conflicting narratives regarding whether or not Russia is going to invade just proves the unknowable reality of the world. But secondly, also, Russia is not going to invade. I think Kyle's link turn is really, really good here, that they're only going to invade in a war where the U.S. looks like it's trying to proxy for conflict against them by sending javelins to the Ukraine. Lastly, on the hedge disadvantage, Kyle is just fundamentally correct here. U.S. hedge is not down, it's up. We have more aircraft carriers than the rest of the world combined, which indicates a reason as to why, even if they're right that generally hedge is trending down, it's not enough to overcome the status quo.
Give me a second to get my ducks in a row here. Order is going to be the insert sheet on top, then the criticism, or I'm sorry, the picks bad, then the criticism, and then the underview, and then just briefly on case. All right. 4 minutes starting. Now, fundamentally, we're ahead here on the we meet because we literally kicked the pick, so there's no sticky offense. But again, Matt's arguments are fundamentally fight here that we're necessarily key to policy education, and that we're key that this specific pick is a fundamentally good thing because this is a specific writer that has specific actions that's targeted a specific group of people, which fundamentally points back to Orientalism, meaning that our framework and our counter standards for this scenario are fundamentally ahead and provide a better framework to engage within this topic debate. On the criticism proper. First, they completely missed the boat on the entirety of this. We're not talking about why science is good or why guns are cool or why my picture sucks. Because yes, okay, I actually like my picture, but thanks. But anyway, the entirety of the argument was about why capitalism is going to kill us all in the status quo. That why we are more maximalist. Why human beings are more maximalist. That why you can't know reality. You've given a bunch of warrants on in both cross-ex and in your articulations on the advantages about why you don't know any of these things. You don't know if Russia's going to invade tomorrow. You don't know how many javelins you're going to send. You don't know any of these things, which means that you fundamentally bite back right into the framework of the criticism itself. Then the argumentation about why we must evaluate this as competing performances is fundamentally true here because in order to create effective affinity, we must first engage within the space so we can compare competing importances and evaluate these as competitive speech acts. Because literally nothing happens outside of this debate space, meaning that you must first evaluate these as competitive speech acts. You're not actually going to send any javelins after this plan. It's just we just have to evaluate it as a speech acts. On the link level, you fundamentally strip value to life. You are the problematic one in this scenario. Who gets the hearts who gets the hearts for these people? Who gets the hearts for the automatons? Who gets to put these cogs in the machines? It's the capitalist machine that is going to take away and strip the value to life of everybody. It doesn't matter if we all die because we're gonna have no value to life because we're all gonna be meaningless cogs and meaningless machines. Third is the duty ethics, and I think this is the fundamental killer here because there's absolutely no ink on it because you are trying to act as a moral target for somebody else, but if there's any risk of you linking back into the dissent, then it means the perm fundamentally doesn't stand, and you do because your entire app is duty ethics towards the United States, towards the grand strategy, meaning that you are the duty ethics we are trying to mean that the perm fundamentally doesn't stand. On the perm proper, the perm isn't necessary because you literally concede that your duty ethics, meaning that the perm fundamentally does not stand, but also all of those all of the impacts act as independent reasons as to why to the disadvantage on here as to why the perm fundamentally doesn't stand in and of itself, and that we are key to on the alt proper. We are key in order to break the paradox of the affirmative that we must embrace the art as important as of itself to drive apart this. But who cares about the actual material changes when actually we can garner value from life in the moment. And then on the impacts, again, just that you do strip value to life, and that it would be better to die with value than to live with no value, meaning that it's better to be free from the capitalist cog machine that you strip the value to life. On to the affirmative case. First, on your interview, you should prefer our framing on this because having no life is not worth living, and you are fundamentally bending back into the liberals, into the capitalist economy, meaning that you're going to strip back our value to life, and that the criticism impacts turn the entirety of this sheet, meaning that you should not vote here. But they're not. But we're not trying to build social movements again. That we're key to the solvency mechanism of the affirmative, and by satirizing the military as itself, we are able to better solve and check back for the harms of the affirmative. On to the first advantage. Again, I just want to extend across that literally no nuclear strikes have ever happened for a cyber attack. You haven't given any articulation as to why that would happen or why that link scenario stands in any way, shape, or form. On the second one, the conflict narrative it is just fundamentally true here. I think Matt does a great job of extending that this proves that you prove we live in an unknowable reality, but actually the United States is proxying for conflict, makes the conflict worse, and that hegemony is increasing because we have more military than everybody else.
Under fascism.
It's going to be the picks bad. Then it's going to be the AF top down. Then it's going to be the K top down. Anybody not ready? Fantastic. Concede that we meet. Let's go to advantage 1. We'll concede that there's no nukes as a result of cyber warfare. Let's go to advantage 2. I will read defense here. Particularly, there's no extinction from Ukrainian invasion. NATO doesn't really care about Russia or Ukraine, particularly because they view it as a domestic issue, which means there's no extinction. The third advantage, that's if there's any floating offense on the link level. Let's go to the third advantage. You've conceded the articulation that hedges in decline. Now, you see that we have more aircraft carriers, and this is particularly new, which means I get golden answers. The first argument is going to be China's necessarily already building aircraft carriers that enable them to be able to check back against the United States aircraft carriers, and our aircraft carriers are absolutely aging in a world where we've operated the same aircraft carrier in the last 20, 30 years in the South China Sea and in the Fifth Fleet out of Bahrain. There's no articulation as to how these aircraft carriers are necessarily able to shore up any decreases in hedge. You've also conceded the particular arguments that Biden is necessarily seen as incompetent and the industrial base is failing. Only the firm is able to resolve back for the industrial base, which is the only way to increase hegemony in a world where you've conceded the internally the hegemony is necessarily being able to resolve extinction, particularly because of this power vacuums that occurred. There is no way in which you're able to you're not able to this implicates the insolvency of the affirmative in the first place. The alternative is not able to resolve the affirmative, particularly because you don't change the industrial base. But secondarily, there's no way no way which you don't have access to extinction as a result of the affirmative. Yeah, that's fine. But it doesn't matter because the rest of this debate is going to come down to framing mechanisms and whether or not things are real and shit like that. Let's go to the underview. You say that it's a question of life not worth living. Well, you say that you're a massive impact turn, but in a world where you don't articulate as to how you're an impact turn, you just say that your framing mechanism is necessarily better. There's no offense as a result of this impact turn. There's no reason why extinction is necessarily bad. This is a framing question. Now, it's how we think about these particular issues is not whether or not extinction is good or bad. You have made no articulation as to extinction being necessarily good. The only articulation you have out of the critique that extinction is good is that you should let things die and stop trying to worry to the future. We'll articulate why this is necessarily a good thing, but this is not enough to be able to take out the entire extinction scenario of the firm. If you say that you're satirizing the military, you're not able to resolve back for things like grand strategy, we'll indicate you've conceded that grand strategy is absolutely better, particularly because policy making and the ability to understand these policies are necessarily good for debate because it creates. That's fine. Let's just go. Okay. at the top of the framework, as an overview to the critique, your entire scenario relies on extinction being necessary or inevitable. You say that extinction is the global uniqueness is predicated on extinction is under climate change. In a world where you've conceded that scientific rationalism is able to resolve climate change, there's no way in which this extinction necessarily frames the uniqueness of the critique. There are two extinction scenarios at the end of the round. The first is going to be climate change, which we resolve vis-a-vis carbon capture and scientific rationalism. The second is going to be the hegemony decline, which is solved via the affirmative. This means we control the global uniqueness, i.e. that extinction will not occur in the future, which means that survivalism is absolutely better in order to secure a position into the future and create new forms of value to life into the future, which means that in a world where the affirmative goes cold conceded and the extinction scenario is out of the MG on the critique go cold conceded, there's no unique impact out of your critique. The first thing I want on the framing level is that we are able to know things. You say that you can't see shit. We'll indicate that you can still detect IR through things you build in scientific rationalism, which indicates that the more that we know that the universe is necessarily good, and that scientific rationalism is able to create things like carbon capture. The next argument I want is that it's inevitable. People will always look to seeing what they want to see, which indicates that there's no way in which you're able to A, export this, or B, create new forms of value to life. Even if you yourself are able to create forms of value to life, there is no way in which this is able to export itself to other individuals, which means that you have fundamentally lost the framing question, which means that your understanding of what is real or what is not real doesn't actually pertain to the impacts. We'll indicate that extinction is absolutely real. You conceded this out of the affirmative, and you conceded this on the impact level of the critique. Let's drop into the alternative. The first argument we want is extension of the picture. And this is absolutely going to be better, particularly because being a hedge debater is cool. You say it's about value to life and that we're duty ethics. We're not saying that our duty is necessarily towards the United States federal government. Our duty is towards talking about explosions and guns, which is cool. You can wave away this argument, but in a world where this is necessarily not distinct from the affirmative, then you are always going, or not distinct from the alternative particular understanding of like what is cool and what is not cool, or like what value to life is. Then you still give us access to understanding the value of life. The next argument I want is that you say you extend this solves the affirmative argument. There is no warrant here. They do not solve the affirmative, which means that the only way you're able to resolve extinction is necessarily the affirmative. You absolutely lead to extinction because you deny any type of scientific rationalism and the ability to create carbon capture. But you can just vote on extinction first. I'm going to do a bunch of impact weighing. Kyle does literally no impact weighing of the LOR. There are three reasons why extinction comes first. The first is that it's incalculable. You have a cognitive bias as a human to not evaluate things like extinction because you don't understand. They're fundamentally, it's too big of an impact for you to understand, which means you should fight against this and understand that extinction should be prioritized in your own mind. The second is liberatory futures. In a world where extinction is not inevitable, you've conceded this out of the climate change articulation on the critique and the impacts of the affirmative. Liberatory futures are necessarily capable of being created vis-a-vis prioritizing extinction. The third argument is going to be future generations.
Point of order.
Yeah.
I understand that this is just impact calculus, but I think the way that the liberatory futures argument interacts with the framing of the negative is a little bit new and probably could have been in the MG.
Okay.
I think that this is like very strictly just impact weighing because like extinction does something that implicates the future and we're just extrapolating what it does to the future. I think if we would, then like use this to cross apply everywhere, maybe it's new, but this is very like clearly tagged underneath impact weighing, but it's a panel.
Yeah, I'm sure it's under consideration.
Cool. I mean, I have 8 seconds left, but the third reason extinction comes first is because for future generations, in a world where value to life is able to be secured for future generations, you always evaluate the ability to create new life in the future. This is going to mean we outweigh cold on face. Vote F.
Good
round, y'all.
Good round, y'all. It's always fun.
Oh, yeah.
Great round. I'm
Great
sorry
round.
you didn't like my picture.
Sorry, just a heads up. I think Brittany said that we are not disclosing this round, so I think y'all are getting a decision at like awards. So don't feel like you need to hang out if you want to leave.
Alrighty. Thank you all so much for joining.
All right.